Do you believe in déjà vu, Tom? I'm getting that sense right now.
Yeah, I do. I experience it almost daily.
You believe in déjà vu, Tom? I'm getting that sense right now.
Yeah, I do. I experience it almost daily.
Do you believe in it as a phenomenon of cognitive wiring, or do you believe in it as a folding of space-time?
The former.
I'm extremely not shocked to hear your opinion on that. All right.
But if anyone's going to fold space-time, it's probably going to be you.
Yes.
And get me caught up all inside it.
Although I hear you can only fold it like 7 times and then...
That's right, before you get to the moon or whatever.
Well, isn't that what gravity does? It doesn't fold it, but it bends space-time, right?
Gravity doesn't bend space-time. It's mass that bends space-time. And because of that, we have gravity?
Right.
I don't know.
Yes, the perceived phenomena of gravity, where it appears that something is falling, is actually just going along a straight line. No, wait, how do I say that?
We're getting into dangerous territory here.
Oh, yeah.
We're something we just completely don't understand.
I believe what we're trying to do, Tom, is off the cuff at the start of the record, explain general relativity.
You're right.
Which is probably slightly above our grade level. So we should probably stick to hacking up Star Wars and all that good stuff. So
I have a bunch of things I could revisit if you'd like to revisit some things that we talked about before.
I love revisiting. I kind of feel like we eclipsed new topics about the Eclipse episode, and now we're going to just be endlessly circling back on everything we've covered. So I imagine follow-up from now until the end of the podcast, personally. So yes, I am all good for revisiting.
Something we haven't talked about in a while, that we talked about a few times last year, is our downloads.
Yes, and our uploads.
Well, we have somewhat infrequent uploads, but a lot more downloads than uploads, thankfully.
That is good, yes.
Yeah. But I just wanted to comment on the fact that I just really love the fact that we have so many international people downloading our podcast. I think that just thrills me to bits.
It is fantastic, and it's endlessly fascinating as to why that is. And I just love imagining there being little pockets of listeners in all these different countries and what that must be like.
Yeah, because like almost 60% of our total downloads are coming from outside the United States, which just really tickles me.
That is fantastic. It must be because we're such a font of knowledge about the American scene. People just want to, in this era of fake news, Tom, you have to pick and choose your information sources. And
yeah, I wouldn't want to proffer any explanation of why that is.
Yeah, no, that is pretty sweet.
I'm just happy that it's there.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you're interested, but I was just pulling up, looking at the basically the top 10 list of countries that consume our little production here.
So prior, in our first review of this, it was US, UK, and then, if I recall correctly, the Netherlands? Was that the top 3 originally?
Yep. And that's still the top 3.
Alrighty.
Yeah. We are, for some reason, do very well in the Low Countries because Belgium is number 4.
Oh, fantastic.
And then 5 and 6 are other parts of the English-speaking Commonwealth, Canada and Australia.
Okay.
Then we dip into Scandinavia with Sweden and Denmark.
Awesome.
Then number 9 is Germany.
I have some Swedish roots, by the way, as well as German roots.
Oh yeah?
Oh yeah. I'm a hodgepodge of international excellence.
And number 10 is Norway. So
nice.
Low Countries, Germany,
right?
Scandinavia. We love you.
Awesome. Are there any individual countries towards the bottom of the list that stood out to you as, wow, I can't believe we have even more than one person hailing from such a location?
Yes. Number 14, Bulgaria.
Oh, nice.
Wouldn't have expected that.
Shout out to dear listeners in Bulgaria.
Yep.
Come hop on the Reddit and tell us why in Bulgaria you have hooked into the Tom and Pedcast.
Yeah. And a little bit further down the list, probably one of my favorite nation states, Anonymous Proxy. Our hats off to you, Anonymous Proxy. You're doing good work.
As I recall correctly, their national currency is Bitcoin. Is that right? That's good. Well, I won't expect to hear from them anytime soon. Or if we do, it'll be
anonymously.
yes,
Correct.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome.
So another thing that we mentioned recently, actually a couple episodes ago, that I just want to do a quick update on. I had apparently mistakenly referred to the phrase "on accident" as a regional dialect.
Okay.
And I have since discovered that "on accident" is not a regional dialect, a regional variation. It's actually a generational one.
Huh.
So the younger you are, the more likely you are to say "on accident" rather than "by accident," which was surprising to me.
Huh. So you said that by accident during our recent episode. Is that correct?
Right. I incorrectly ascribed the use of "on accident" by accident.
Yo, getting a little meta on me, dude. This is just slight tangent. This is not your first correction here, Tom. I think you were there's like brief slip up on the definition of life, I believe, at one point. Other minor topics. See, I only mispronounce things every other word. You actually get knowledge wrong, so I think that's actually the greater transgression.
It's not a correction. It's just a evolution in my knowledge capture.
It's not a bug. It's a feature.
Right. The only way you learn things is by making mistakes.
Right.
So,
my knowledge.
This is interesting. The fact that for some reason the younger generation in the United States are transitioning from using "by accident" to "on accident." I don't think anyone knows why, but it's happening.
So I always wonder what the origin of new turns of phrase are, because I think most of the time the turns of phrase that you use are just the ones that you hear, right? It's the ones that you pick up in your environment. You say "by accident" because your mother said "by accident." Everybody in your family said "by accident," and all of your friends said it. So why would you ever say anything differently? So if that was all that language evolution was, then language would be static, right? It would never evolve because everybody would always just be referring back to the one thing. So at some point, it sort of implies to me that there have to be individuals that are creating for the first time those turns of phrase, right? And then there's something really appealing or connective about that turn of phrase that hits the mark about what you mean much more accurately, and so you start using it. And I don't think it's most of the time a conscious thing. Like, when people started saying "by accident," they weren't sitting down in the evening saying, "Okay, how do I want to formulate my words tomorrow?" It just felt better. So I wonder if there are ways to unconsciously do this and ways to consciously do this, like consciously inject a turn of phrase into the if you could seed it, right? And if there are statistically more effective points of leverage where you could inject this into the common language intentionally in order to move the language.
Yeah. I've seen some proffered explanation of why "on accident" is gaining wider use, and it's suggested that it's because it is a companion to the phrase "on purpose." When you say you did something on purpose, or you did something by accident, or if you say you did something on purpose and you did something on accident, it's maybe more pleasant. Right.
Okay, so that's actually a good point. It seems like another good reason why a phrase might take over popularity is just because it's easier to say. It sounds more musical.
Yeah.
By accident, I think auditorily is probably a better word than auditorily.
You're injecting that into the dialect now, aren't you?
I am. Let's see how it takes off. It's a little more musically flowing than "on accident." The puzzle pieces connect more seamlessly.
Yeah,
I think. Like when I always like to hear my teenagers speak in turns of phrase that are particular to their generation or groups of friends, and I've seen it evolve where they hook on to little turns of phrase where they're always saying like certain words. And it's
do they use "on accident"?
No, they do not use "on accident." Wait a minute. So what you were saying "on accident" is experiencing a renaissance?
Not a renaissance, but a growth in usage among younger generation.
"On accident" is?
On accident, yes.
Huh. Okay, well that counters my theory that I just said, which was "by accident" is more musically flowing. That's interesting. So in general, Tom, do you consider yourself a strict grammarian with regards to how you speak and your patience with how others speak or write?
Yeah, I try to be.
Because there is sort of this balance, right, between what are the rules of the system and looking at the system structures in the system as a means to an end.
Yeah.
So if somebody is using incorrect grammar and yet you know exactly what they mean, then it's fulfilled the purpose of communication, even though it's not strictly in accordance with the rule set.
Yeah, I don't feel a need to correct people, but I tend to try to be as grammatically sound as I can, especially
Right.
especially in writing.
Yeah. I do feel sometimes when I'm speaking, I found this a little bit speaking publicly. My adherence, the level of strictness that I adhere to the rules of grammar varies depending on the emotional weight of what I'm saying. Like if I'm talking about something very technical and putting together some reasoned argument why a certain position should be held, then I feel a tendency to be more precise with the
Right.
with the rules.
Yeah.
Oh, versus I'm trying to sort of make an impassioned plea for action on something. Those get looser, and it's like it's almost like the rawness of the emotion breaks down the container of how the grammar is trying to hold it in. And I think often that's what appeals to those that kind of rule breaking, is that it touches you at a deeper level than what is my learned understanding of the rules.
Mm. Yeah, I have a tendency to try to favor very precise language as much as possible, especially at work when you're doing IT work. Sometimes it's very, very necessary to use very, very precise language when describing problems and issues.
So it's kind of like coding, where the reason why it's such a error bug filled process to design code is that a computer will do exactly what you tell it to do.
Yes, indeed.
And therefore, you have to be very precise with your instructions. So it will take you absolutely. In other words, the computer is functioning in a 100% response to the rules of the system, as opposed to trying to understand what you meant.
Yeah, a human can figure out what you meant to say. A computer cannot.
So that's actually really interesting. I wonder if as you know, as AIs evolve and as sort of the systems of coding evolve, whether you could get to a system where the interpreter or the compiler, right, the computer system that is taking your instruction set, your program, and converting it into a program, could have a little more slack, a little more leeway in terms of trying to divine what your human intention is. Right. So there's this whole thing. There's many buzzwords in corporate programming and all that, but there's this whole thing called getting away from hands-free coding, right? Or which is, it's too slow to employ all these software developers to actually write programs, and so you need this abstracted system where you're actually just putting pieces together instead of coding by hand, and so that will get you faster results with your applications and such. It's an interesting buzzword to follow, but with the injection of AI, it does make me wonder about what the next abstracted layer of software design will be. Because we're no longer coding, for example, in machine language, well, for the vast majority of applications,
right?
At that machine level, and if you take an individual language like JavaScript, there's a lot of JavaScript today that is abstracted from JavaScript. There's entire languages that compile down to it, TypeScript and WebAssembly, that have become very popular. It's like it's like having an Alexa, these voice personal assistants.
Yeah, Google has one too.
Yeah,
and Siri.
Yeah. So if you say, Alexa, write me a program that does this, and then have it, which is interesting thing. I don't know if you follow like the coming onset of automation. We haven't talked about that directly a lot, but it's often put forth as something that's going to put manual blue collar labor out of work.
Right. Yep.
And us office folk are like, whatever, will be fine. But there's at this point, especially with AI, there's a much broader reach of where automation might call. So it's like we all might be out of a job. I don't know how we got on that tangent, Tom. I'm blaming you.
That's fine.
You brought up Bulgaria, and then I don't know where we went from there.
We're circling back to dialects again, which
Oh, yes.
which also reminded me after we had that discussion about dialects about a hyper regional piece of dialect that you and I use, or at least I know I use it because we grew up in the same town,
Mm.
and that's the word Zoof,
Yes. Zoof.
which is something that I never realized was really localized to our particular hometown until I moved away from there and found that no one else used it or understood what it meant.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I have to leave myself a note because I still connect with some of our friends from the old town.
Yep.
And we should we should reach out to them to see what their feeling is on it, because I actually am having a hard time pinpointing exactly what it means. I totally remember it, but I haven't used it in decades. So my initial feel on the word is
Yep.
a like high school student who's kind of like burnt out.
Yep.
There's kind of a negative connotation to it. It's somewhat a derogatory term.
Yep.
Is that am I getting close?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. It's spelled Zoof, Zoof. And for a perfect example of what that refers to, if you watch the most recent series of Stranger Things, basically Max's older brother is a classic Zoof.
Okay.
It's basically like a long-haired metalhead burnout type of teenager.
So I'm looking at Urban Dictionary right now.
Yep.
The first definition is a nickname for someone whom you feel very intense affection.
That is not it.
The second definition, a Zoof is someone who has absolutely no understanding of the world around them. Ignorant, completely clueless. As in, Jack is the biggest Zoof on the planet.
That's not exactly our usage.
It's just close.
It's close. It's closer, yeah.
Interesting.
But anyway, I just thought that just occurred to me after we had talked about it, and so I
Yeah, right.
run that by you. So let's see if we can get Zoof into wider usage.
Definitely.
Yeah, we even though we grew up in the same town, we went to different high schools,
Yes.
and it's funny thinking back on it because the high school that I was at, they had two different parking lots on opposite side of the building, and one was called the Jock Lot, and the other was called the Zoof Lot, because those are the two major cliques at the high school.
Right.
So if you want to align yourself with the popular jock crowd, you'd park as a senior when you had a car, you'd park in the Jock Lot. Otherwise, you'd be parking in the Zoof Lot with all the burnouts and the losers.
And so, which lot did you choose, Tom?
I was the Zoof Lot, of course.
Nice. So you didn't consider yourself centrally a Zoof by identity per se, but your planet more aligned with those stars? Is that what you're
Exactly.
saying? Okay.
That's right.
Those are more your peeps.
Yeah, I mean, like the Jock Lot, the parking lot called the Jock Lot was next to the gymnasium.
Okay.
Whereas the Zoof Lot was out by the loading docks and the auditorium.
Okay, like the art and drama people.
Yeah, so that all the band people would be out there as well because they would
Oh, yeah.
gravitate towards the Zoof Lot.
Sweet. Gosh, high school cliques, man.
The worst.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I went to a different high school. My cliques were very small. Like, in fact, I don't think my group of friends actually enlarged to the point where we could call it a clique.
A clique of one.
Yes, a loose confederation of cliquettes. I don't know. That's a tough time, high school, with the evolving social groups.
Yeah.
Don't worry, if you are out there in high school, it all ends soon.
It all gets better too.
Yes, and then you realize the thing that everybody tells you, but you don't actually feel the intensity of, which is once you graduate high school's done.
Yeah.
It's actually not your whole world. The whole thing just sort of fades away, and you have life after high school. So if you're unhappy, just stick it out.
I found the experience improved considerably once I reached the conclusion that I didn't care what anyone else thought of me.
Yes. So Tom, I have told my kids explicitly for years, ever since they were young, that you should always care about how other people feel, but you should never care about what other people think.
That's good advice. Yeah.
That is like my guiding light. It's everyone has, you want to be sensitive and compassionate to the feelings of others, and not hurt them in that regard. But their capacity to judge you and to evaluate you, it's nothing. It means absolutely nothing. It only has power to the degree that you give it power. And once you cut that cord, it's very liberating.
Yeah. Another piece of follow up. With Bitcoin, we talked about Bitcoin. There's a YouTube video that I came across afterwards that I just want to throw in the show notes because I just I thought it was funny and I really enjoyed it. It was a video of a computer scientist basically doing Bitcoin mining by hand.
Oh my.
Demonstrating on paper with a pencil the calculations that you have to do one single pass on the SHA-256 hashing algorithm.
Right.
Takes him about 16 minutes to do it out by hand.
Oh my.
So to do a complete block of the hashing would take a couple days at that rate. But it's interesting to see out the binary and hexadecimal arithmetic that goes on to do the hashing algorithm. I thought people would be interested to see that.
Sounds painstaking.
Yeah.
Although it's always good to see hexadecimal. I had a little bit of follow up.
Go. Yes.
Yeah. So we were. So I'm trying to get away from my endless negativity on technology and smartphones and social media. We've been slamming that pretty hard recently.
Yes, we have.
And so I wanted to pass along a little practical technique that I learned recently to moderate my phone use. So for the past week or so, I've had my smartphone completely in grayscale. I don't know if you've heard of this technique.
No.
Okay.
How do you do that?
Okay, so there's the simple setting. It varies whether it's iPhone or Android.
Oh, it's an accessibility option?
Yes. So in iPhone, it's under accessibility, and then I can't remember what the path is. We can put it in the show notes. If Android, it's a little more complicated, but once you Google the instructions, it takes like 20 seconds. But basically, so it turns every color on your phone in every application into grayscale. And it's actually kind of interesting because it's not just black and white. It's not two colors. It's very finely graded grayscale. And so the big advantage of this is that the red notifications, which almost every app uses to draw your attention in, are muted. And so the notifications are still there, but they don't have the cognitively ingrained capacity to stimulate your attention and pull it with those high contrast colors. And I found it, and it's you put this in order to decrease, to take back some of your attention control, right? Yeah. So really when a notification comes up, the ideal situation is I want to be aware of it, and then I want to make my own decision about whether I want to follow up on that notification. There shouldn't be any extra juice in there that is compelling me to click on that notification or to continue to engage in an application that's trying to stimulate me with color, right?
Yeah.
And I've loved it. And it's not a complete solution to phone use. There's definitely still have been times when I'm on my phone longer than I want to. And I mean, that's obvious, I think, because there are things in phones and social media other than color that are compelling you to use them, like we've gone over. But it's similar to your technique of getting those kinds of apps off your home screen.
Yeah. It's a life hack.
Yeah. In fact, that's where I found it was on Lifehacker.
Oh, okay. There you go.
So I was clicking around through the internet sphere about where this originated from, and I came upon this organization and website that I want to forward you the link of. Do that now. All right, I just sent you a link.
Got it. Time well spent.
So this is an organization. Well, let's see. So just to read their blurb, they're building a new organization dedicated to reversing the digital attention crisis and realigning technology with humanity's best interests. That seemed fairly up our alley. So bopping around here. So there's a former Google employee named Tristan Harris who is spearheading this. He's a former design ethicist at Google. And I never knew there was such a position. But he's one of a number of growing former Silicon Valley people who have this kind of backlash against technology, and
they're trying to assuage their guilty conscience about the technology they've brought on the world.
I think so. I think that is part of the motivation, and it's interesting to go through their language, and so they're this isn't just a couple people railing on the internet. They have some pretty good backers and a lot of known names. And so this is happening at a time when Facebook has recently announced, I don't know if you followed this, Zuckerberg's announcement that they're going to be changing their news feed.
Yeah, I did see that.
Where you're going to see more posts, if not all of your posts, from friends and family and not news feeds and pages. Right? So this is yet another fallout from the fake news, Russia interference election business.
Yep.
And also a response to this kind of growing sentiment that, hey, maybe this Pandora's box of social media technology is not completely 100% wonderful thing. And in his announcement, he used the term "time well spent," which people who follow this kind of stuff think was not unintentional. So I think this will be an interesting trend to follow this year in terms of how much traction let's put the brakes on technology and social media, how much that message is coming from people who have actually developed it, and whether that takes a foothold in the media as these things go on.
Yeah, I would tend to have a more, probably a pretty cynical view of how long that's going to last. They're in the spotlight at the moment, so that's why they're making these motions towards these corrections. But once they're out of the spotlight, I think they'll just go back to business as usual.
Yeah, of all the sort of oppositional responses I've found on the internet so far, I found this the most compelling because it seems organized. It seems focused on the cognitive impact and not just simply a technology is evil kind of message. So
right,
something I'll be following. Check in with you time to time.
Okay. You can send me a notification.
Yeah, exactly.
In grayscale. I would recommend switching your phone to monochrome.
Monochrome.
I.e., you just push a button and everything just goes black.
Okay. Yes, that would be. I think they call that bricking the phone. Is that?
Yes, that's the ideal way to cut down on your notifications.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I was poking through their time well spent website. I was looking for the download our app. Hadn't found it yet.
Yeah.
So they at least thought of irony there.
Something I actually mentioned to you after we recorded last time, but I wanted to maybe repeat it again for the benefit of the listener.
Mm-hmm.
I was suggesting to you to listen to our friends at the A-Town podcast and their review of The Last Jedi.
Yes.
Because I thought they did a good job, and they were an example of two people who are obviously Star Wars fans. They're obviously fans of film. They know their stuff about both subjects, and they both really enjoyed The Last Jedi and had lots of complimentary things to say about that. So as a contrast to a lot of other more critical reviews of The Last Jedi, I would recommend people giving them a listen.
All right. Yeah, I'm still coming down. So speaking of notifications, right? My Google News feed knows that I was reading reviews of The Last Jedi, and so I keep seeing news about The Last Jedi and such. And it's this continual stream of, I feel like I'm being browbeaten by the younger generation and being constantly told that I just don't get it, that I'm just being too much of a stick in the mud. But don't you know he was trying to challenge your assumptions? Don't you know he wanted to change it up? Don't you know? I'm like, yes, I get it. I understand that. You don't have to preach me on that front. I just don't think that he executed it well. And I still have a very viscerally negative reaction to that.
Yeah.
But maybe I should just make myself listen to something as you presented, perhaps a little more balanced, like the A-Town review, and try and get beyond that. I just think at the end of the day, it's okay for people not to like the movie.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, we don't have to get into this again, but yeah. I'll just mention that I the last few weeks I've made a conscious decision to decide whether I wanted to be a original trilogy fan or rather a Star Wars fan in general.
Right.
And I decided I wanted to be the latter, and I stopped being so hypercritical of anything that wasn't original trilogy, and I found my enjoyment of these things has increased tremendously. And in fact, I've been doing a lot of binging of Star Wars recently. I rewatched all the films, and I've been watching the Clone Wars TV series and binging through the comic books. So I recommend not taking it so seriously, and we're gonna get a hell of a lot of Star Wars coming out in the next decade or so. So if you want to enjoy it, you gotta lower the volume on your hypersensitivity to the mistakes and flaws.
I see that. So this somewhat reminds me of a comment that one of my philosophy professors made. One of my favorite courses that he taught, philosophy of art. We were talking about what is art and what is good art. And his comment was he finds it most helpful to have a very broad, loose definition of what art is, but a narrower definition of what good art is. And so in this context, it makes me think of, so Tom, when you think of like what makes a good Star Wars movie versus what makes a good movie, do you have a different set of expectations? Like I'm thinking about these Marvel movies, which we've said, even when they're done well, aren't like deep movies.
Right.
Like they're like a fun day out at the movies.
And I enjoy a lot. I enjoy most of them.
Yeah, eat some candy, whatever. It's cool. Nothing too like moving, whatever. If Star Wars is only ever that to you, is that enough? Or do you go into a Star Wars movie with a slightly different expectation? So and another way to say this is, could a director do absolutely anything, and as long as it's in the Star Wars universe, you're going to be happy with it?
No, I think there's a certain level of quality that you would expect, but I think letting go on some of my expectations improved my enjoyment significantly. And in fact, I rewatched Rogue One recently,
right?
Which I really had a tough time with when I originally watched it. This time, I loved it. So go figure.
So ignorance is bliss. That's what you're saying.
No, not ignorance, but just being, just chill out.
Let's talk about something we're happily in agreement on, which is Wi-Fi is not going to give you cancer.
Okay.
Are you not in total agreement on that?
I'm in agreement on that. Yes.
All right, sweet. I bring this up, Tom, because with my public servant-facing life on school committee,
yeah,
we get emails from time to time from different organizations and such, and there was this one recently that wanted us to attend a screening of this movie, this documentary about the dangers of Wi-Fi.
Yeah, you sent this link to me, and I had to do a little face palm at my desk.
Yeah, about how soaking in this Wi-Fi is going to give you cancer and create all these health problems, and the government is covering it up, and we need to act. And it's a really interesting example to me of how the nature of the scientific method and how awareness and knowledge of science propagates itself into the mainstream consciousness, and what the roadblocks are to disseminating that knowledge. Because, I mean, if you think about it, to play devil's advocate slightly here for a moment, would you put it past a corporation or the government to do something that caused harm to the public and yet advanced its own ends of profit or power?
Well, of course they would. I mean, that's why we have regulations,
right? So, in other words, there's a trust factor here, right? So it's like to me that's kind of like the first necessary precondition to this kind of hysteria taking hold, is that you have to have some deep-seated mistrust of public authorities.
Mm-hmm.
Which and I think, by the way, that kind of mistrust is healthy. There have been, we don't need to go down the list, tobacco and other things, but it is not beyond the common sense possibility that the government or a corporation would do something that would be harming people and would try to cover it up, and so that possibility exists, right? And
it's good to keep tabs on that. Trust but verify.
Exactly. And so so you take that as the first precondition. The second precondition is that we don't have good data on what it's like for human beings to live with this much Wi-Fi radiation, right? With this much low wavelength electromagnetic radio waves.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we are the first time in history living with an enormous amount of that level of radiation in the environment. This wavelength of electromagnetic radiation.
Well, you could say that, in fact, there is a tremendous amount of data because we're all currently soaking in it.
Oh, okay, yes. But I'm saying, but prior to the dawn of Wi-Fi being everywhere.
Right.
So, in other words, while we do have 50 to 60 years of research about the health effects of radio waves, since radio has been around with us, we don't have very long studies that say this is, here's your control subject and here's your subjects that have been exposed to Wi-Fi for decades, and here's the result. And so because we don't yet have that, there's the unknown. And I think the third thing that gives this kind of thing traction in a human consciousness is that it's a fundamental principle of science that you can never disprove something entirely.
Yeah.
Right? It's like logically impossible to say Wi-Fi absolutely will not give you cancer because you've never tested for every single variable in every single situation. Yeah. Therefore, there's always going to be this logically possible and yet infinitesimally small possibility of something causing something. And in order to maintain its logical integrity, science has to admit that. Right? Even things that we're very sure of, we talk about in terms of theories. And if you don't have a good understanding of why that is with the way the scientific method works, it can feel to the public like there's a lot of uncertainty about that.
Yeah, it's just basic scientific literacy.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think all that sort of conspires, and the fact that Wi-Fi is radiation and that uranium does have radiation.
It sounds scary.
Yes. So I briefly wanted to hit the science on this because I did find it pretty interesting. So so Wi-Fi is very low wavelength radiation. And by radiation we mean propagation through the electromagnetic spectrum, right?
I would correct you and say it's low power.
Oh, okay, both low power and low wavelength.
Yeah. There's plenty of things that are in common usage that are even lower wavelength, just like radio waves.
Right. And when we talk about radiation, but when we typically talk about what radiation types that can cause cancer and that we think about causing cancer, it's because they are much higher wavelength, much higher power, and because they have a higher wavelength and higher power, what they're able to do is ionize atoms, meaning you knock out the electrons from whatever atom the radiation is hitting. Ionization.
Yeah, this is ionizing radiation, which is stuff like gamma rays and X-rays and stuff you get from merging black holes and stuff like that.
And also ultraviolet radiation from the sun. Right. So this is the reason why you put sunscreen on.
But radio waves and microwaves and stuff like that below the visual light spectrum are non-ionizing radiation. So they do not have this effect on atoms and molecules.
Right, because of their wavelength and because of the power level. And there's this other thing. The inverse square law also applies here, which is the power that a wavelength has to impact anything is inversely proportionate to how far away it is.
Yeah, it attenuates further away from the source it is.
And it's not just linear. So it's like your exposure to radiation, at 10 feet is much greater than your exposure to radiation at 20 feet is much greater than 30 feet. And so they've done tests and studies of not just being next to your home Wi-Fi router, which by the way is only transmitting data like 1% of the time. That's another thing, is that this thing is vast majority of the time is off. They've done studies with people that work next to the local base stations, and it's still far below the health level of thing. It's all this kind of conspires together, and then you get the World Health Organization that comes out with a statement, and we can link to their summary, but basically they go over and over and over about how the conglomeration of studies doesn't conclude this, and et cetera, et cetera. And then it's still classified as a possible carcinogen. And so because we can't disprove it, and because we don't have longitudinal studies that have a test group and a exposed group where we can say definitively. And so that's the phrase that
people latch onto.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when you have much of the public that doesn't understand electromagnetic radiation, ionization, the inverse square law, then you get media reports that bypass that ability to inoculate yourself from this kind of fear, and it stimulates your fear.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's very much like the vaccines causing autism scare, which has caused the return of measles in some areas of the U.S. And that was all based on one study that was later debunked. And so this is another issue with the Wi-Fi causes cancer. There have been some studies to suggest there is some effect at very high intensity levels, power levels of low Wi-Fi radiation that has some effect on rats.
Mm-hmm.
But not only are animal studies of rats difficult to translate to humans, but there have been questions about the validity of these studies, which underscores why you don't just look at one study and say, okay, climate change is real. There is a preponderance of studies of needing to validate these things over and over and over and over and over again. The reason why we have solid scientific theories is because they've been proven a gajillion times over.
Right. It's a good idea to study these things, but there's no science to back up the fact that Wi-Fi is dangerous to you. I mean, sunlight is more dangerous to you than Wi-Fi.
Right.
By a vast amount of difference.
By a country mile.
Yeah. So what's this is being brought up in school committee?
So the group that was stoking this fear wanted us to attend and, become part of the rallying point for the community. And so my initial response to these things is, you don't give it more attention than it needs.
Mm-hmm. So what is their ultimate goal? Why are they bringing this to the school committee?
Because they want, because schools have Wi-Fi and, we're exposing our children to this radiation. And so this is a public health crisis and the governments don't want you to know about it. And the tech companies don't want you to know about it. And so, we need to have a grassroots revolution in order to overcome these evil forces.
They're advocating removing Wi-Fi from schools. Is that the idea? Because it's dangerous
everywhere.
to children. Oh, to everywhere.
Everywhere. Yeah. So.
Okay. All right.
there you go.
Good luck with that.
Yeah.
It's junk science. What can we say about that?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess the only reason it makes me think 2 or 3 times about it is that, like, as laughable as that promotion of that idea is, to laugh at it doesn't help the public consciousness, right? If you're simply being derogatorily dismissive of it and not saying, okay, well, here's actually the argument why this doesn't hold any water, then you're just sort of feeding into the, oh, well, you're part of the institutional problem, and right, and so you have to, like, it's sort of and it's, I guess, to put a final positive note on it, I guess in some way it keeps science on its toes. I mean, if you can't explain why Wi-Fi is not dangerous, then there is some sort of gap in the rigor of your own understanding.
Exactly right. Yeah. I mean, it's good to ask questions, but you can't jump to conclusions without evidence. I mean, and that's what pseudoscience does. It comes up with the conclusion and then seeks out the evidence to support that conclusion. And when science works the completely opposite way, it gathers evidence and then creates conclusions based on that evidence.
In other words, having a hypothesis that can't be disproved is not proof of that hypothesis.
But let me ask you this. Since I like to ask you questions.
You do like to ask me questions.
We've banged on about mobile phones on this podcast a number of times and how bad we think they are for people for a number of reasons. If people are complaining about cell phones for the wrong reasons, does that suddenly make it okay in your mind? Can you find common cause with people who are badly informed but are going towards the same goal as, namely, reducing cell phone usage with children?
Common cause. So I don't think that I would feel it would be ethically appropriate to promote what I know is false in order to achieve an end. I would never promote that Wi-Fi causes cancer, for example, in order to decrease phone use. However, there's an organized, motivated person or group that is highly skeptical of technology and sees dangers in it. Mm-hmm. So if I reached out to them and listened to them, so I think it's very important, regardless of how wacky you think someone's viewpoint is, most people just want to be heard and understood first, right? So try and understand where they're coming from, and then say, okay, well, here's why I think your conclusion is false, and then give them, and yet, if you are really concerned, if we share the same principle that we fear negative impact of technology on people and children, and we want to work towards improving that, well, here's something that's much more relevant and noteworthy, like its impact to cognitive processing and attention.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think there's a possibility of reaching out. I would never. I would hope to think I would never promote a lie just to achieve a social or political end.
Yeah. But to inject a little self-awareness here, we've speculated a number of times in this podcast about the possible negative effects, emotionally and cognitively of mobile devices without a hell of a lot of scientific evidence.
True. So, that's a good point.
Yep.
Right. So what is the point, or rather, what is the evidence I'm going on? So I guess I'm going on the evidence of my own life and the evidence, the anecdotal evidence of multiple people who have experienced this.
But anecdote is not evidence.
Anecdote is not. Anecdote is evidence.
It's not very strong evidence, though.
I don't know. It's evidence of a particular weight. So, for example, in the World Health Organization's review of Wi-Fi danger, it was saying how some people anecdotally report that they're more personally sensitive to electromagnetic radiation and Wi-Fi, and they can feel it.
Yeah, but that doesn't survive any kind of double-blind test when they actually test these things.
Right. However, what they say is that while there's no direct evidence for this condition, like you were just saying, we still need to be sensitive to the plight of individuals who are experiencing this condition. In other words, it's still a valid, it's still data. Yeah. What weight you should assign to that data and draw a conclusion from is a different question than is it valid data?
Yeah, they're experiencing the symptoms, but they're coming to the wrong conclusion about what's the cause of the symptoms.
Right. Like we didn't conclude that cigarettes cause cancer simply from and immediately from a large, rigorous scientific study of it. People started dying from cancer. And we said, oh, well, what's going on? Well, we have anecdotal evidence that this person smoked a lot. Well, that's not evidence that smoking causes cancer. Okay, but it should point us in some direction. It suggests some sort of indication.
Right.
And then I think it's like subjective experience can be very helpful clues to start.
Yep.
And then you follow the data. You follow the trail.
It needs to survive the scientific process.
Yes. However, there is another layer to this, which is subjective experience moves much faster than scientific conclusion.
Indeed.
Typically.
Yeah.
And you only have your one lifetime to live. So are you going to wait? Are you going to use your cell phone 20 hours a day and be on Facebook all the time simply because there's not hardcore science that says it's harmful? Right? And at what point do you have to sort of fill in the gaps of hardcore scientific conclusion with your own subjective feel about what is and is not right for you? Like I kind of feel like in the intentional crafting of our own personal life and experience, we use the validity and weight of our own personal experience all the time to make decisions. If I'm on Facebook an hour every night after dinner and I just feel bad afterwards, that's not enough for everybody in the world to scientifically conclude that social media is bad.
Yeah. It's enough for you, though.
Exactly. It's enough for me to maybe put the phone down.
Yeah.
And so that's me making a significant life choice that isn't based on scientific conclusion, based on my own practical experience. Now, you may think it's reasonable and logical, but it's not. I didn't put the lab coat on. And
yeah. If you want to get rid of all the Wi-Fi in your house, go nuts. But when you come to school committee and insist that all the students have to have that removed as well, based on zero evidence or just anecdotal evidence at best, then that's when you have a problem.
Indeed. All right, Tom, I think that's good. I'm nominating you for school committee.
No, thank you. No, thank you.
Well, they do say, the people who should be in decision-making positions are the people that don't want to be in decision-making positions. Because then that there's no ulterior motive or ego. So, you're making a compelling case for your candidacy.
Yeah. Okay. You're going to press gang me into service?
I am. That would be sweet. It's an interesting form of government, random. Well, it's like juries are, you're pressed into service.
Oh yeah. You know what? I, I haven't had jury duty in years, and it's really annoying me.
You're one of the few.
Yeah, I would love to be on a jury. I never get called ever.
Oh, that's too bad. I would be great on a jury because I can spot a guilty person just like that.
Yeah.
I was on a grand jury once.
Oh wow.
Not for a specific case, but
Yeah, you were impaneled for a while.
for 3 months.
Wow.
And so in the U.S. justice system, if you're not familiar, you don't go straight to a trial. It goes to a grand jury first, and there's a lower bar where you're supposed to determine, is there a preponderance of evidence for this case moving forward. So it's not as high of a bar of guilt. So you either true bill or no bill the accusation. And so it's vast majority of cases are obvious. It's just the state presenting their evidence and saying, okay, yes, this is fine. But there are interesting number of cases where it's on the line and you're making a call. Interesting social experience.
Yeah, I haven't been called for jury duty in at least 20 years. It's been more than 20 years. That's way too long. It's supposed to be every 3 years you go into the pot,
Yeah, right.
But I never get it. I don't know why.
Maybe you're on some list.
I must be on some list. Yeah. I've never actually served on a jury. I've been called in only once, I think, in my entire adult life, which is just insane.
Wow.
And I missed out on being on a jury, which I was really disappointed about because I'm one of those weirdos who wants to be on a jury.
Is it because like you are just really desirous to judge people, or
I don't know.
What is it?
I don't know what the hang up is. I just never get. My wife gets notifications every few years for jury duty, but I've never gotten one.
No, but what is your interest in it? You just think it'd be an interesting experience?
Yeah, I think it's been an interesting experience, and it's a great responsibility to have, and it's a responsibility that every citizen is entitled to, or
Right.
is called upon at some point to do so. And our justice system is designed around that, and it's a hell of a lot better than a lot of other quote unquote justice systems you might have in the other parts of the world where there is no justice.
Yeah.
So to be a part of that is a great honor, I think.
Yeah, they say the jury system is a terrible form of justice, but it's better than every other form of justice.
Exactly. Yeah.
There are few other opportunities in your life where you are impaneled. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Did you? You know what I meant to ask you about, Tom, that we have not followed up on forever.
Shoot, what is it?
The Doctor Who Christmas and Regeneration special.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Featuring Capaldi and the actor who portrays the original Doctor.
Mm-hmm.
How did you like that? Knowing that you're a huge fan of the classic Who.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought it was good. It was fun seeing them recreate the old TARDIS set from the early 60s.
Yeah, and they even wove in some footage from the old series, which was neat. Did you think it was that had you seen that actor portray the first Doctor before? Did he do a commendable job?
Yes, that's the first time he's officially played the Doctor in the series Doctor Who. He had appeared before in that docudrama called what's it called? An Adventure in Space and Time, where he played William Hartnell.
Okay.
Playing the Doctor. It was a kind of a biopic about William Hartnell, the actor who originally played Doctor Who.
Oh, okay.
So he had played that role before. So he is it's kind of getting a little meta there, where he's now playing the character that he was playing before as the actor who played the character.
Right.
So that was David Bradley, who's
okay.
Yeah, I thought he did a good job. The costume was spot on. He had some of the first Doctor's mannerisms down.
They seem to focus an awful lot on the antiquated gender norms.
Yeah,
that he was.
Yeah, that was a little fun because if you're looking back at stuff from the 60s, it's a different. It was a different time.
Yes. Sweet. Well, I'm glad you like that. And we got like 2 minutes of Jodie Whittaker, but
Yep. And she's got a Yorkshire accent, which is nice.
She has a what?
A Yorkshire accent.
Yorkshire accent.
Yep. It's Northern Britain.
Okay.
It's an accent that the Doctor has not had before.
Okay. I think I'm going to be able to understand her a little bit better than Capaldi.
Oh, Yorkshire's can be kind of tough if you're not used to it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's not going to be bad as Scottish, but
Okay.
it's more northern.
Mm.
Like Chris Eccleston had a northern accent too. It's probably going to be a little bit stronger than his accent, but not as strong as Capaldi's.
All right. Well, I can just throw the subtitles on. Be good.
Hey everyone. The hardest part of producing a podcast is just getting the word out. If you enjoy what we do, let people know by sharing us on social media. Or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. It all helps new listeners to find us. We thank you for your support.
You believe in déjà vu, Tom?